What if the last alien of her kind didn't come here to conquer, but to quietly vanish? And what if the only person who noticed had already stopped believing in anything at all? I met her in a town the stars forgot. One of those places with no interstate signs, no chain stores, just rusted gas pumps and a diner that served the same pie since Eisenhower. I'd come out here to be left alone. That was the plan. People say time heals. They don't tell you it drags its feet. I wasn't looking for anything. Not forgiveness, not a future, just quiet. And then she walked into the library. That's how it started. Not with a crash of thunder or some alien light show, just a woman in a gray coat, looking lost in the nonfiction aisle. She wasn't like the others in town. She didn't talk much, didn't smile unless she meant it, didn't flinch when old folks gave her that sideways look, the kind they save for outsiders and ghosts. I don't know why I noticed her. Maybe because she moved like someone who hadn't decided if she belonged on this planet. Or maybe because I saw myself in her. I asked her name once. "Kael," she said, that was all. No last name, no hometown. Just Kael. I'd be lying if I said I didn't try to guess what she was running from. But truth is, I didn't ask. Because part of me didn't want to ruin it. She came by the library every Thursday. Same time. Sat by the window seat with a book she never seemed to finish. Always on the same page. I offered her coffee once. She said she didn't drink it, said it tasted loud. Never heard anyone describe coffee that way before. But then, everything about her was just a little sideways. I noticed things. Like how she never blinked when the bell over the door rang. Like how she flinched, not at thunder, but at violin music. Like how she always paused before touching anything metal, like it might remember her. I told myself it was just trauma. Some old pain she hadn't unpacked yet. Lord knows I had enough of that myself. But deep down, something in me whispered, "She's not here by accident." And neither am I. The night I really saw her, not just with my eyes, but felt her, was a Thursday. Same gray coat, same seat by the window. But this time, she wasn't reading. She was staring out across the street, at nothing, and I swear to God, there were stars moving in her reflection that weren't in the sky. Not a lot, just one, like a flicker of some memory she hadn't meant to keep. I didn't say anything that day, but when she looked up and her eyes met mine, I knew. She wasn't from here. Maybe not even from anywhere I could point to on a map. But somehow, she'd ended up in the same forgotten corner of Earth as me, and that had to mean something. I didn't talk to her again for almost 2 weeks. Not because I didn't want to, but because something about her silence felt sacred. You see, some people are quiet because they're shy, others because they're afraid. But her silence, it felt chosen. Like someone who'd lived through too many sounds that hurt, and now preferred the stillness that couldn't break her anymore. I started noticing her outside the library too. At the grocery store, never more than a few items. At the bus stop, always early, never rushed. At the park, just sitting, watching the sky like it was supposed to say something back. And every time our paths crossed, I saw it again, that flicker, that quiet storm behind her eyes, like she was listening to something no one else could hear. One day it rained, the kind of rain that smells like dust getting forgiven. And I found her sitting on the bench outside the library. No umbrella, no coat, just her. Soaked. Still. I stepped out and stood beside her. Didn't say a word. Didn't need to. After a while, I offered her my old thermos, still warm, still bitter. She looked at it, then at me, then shook her head softly. "Too loud," she said again. Same words, but this time, softer. Like maybe she didn't mind the offer. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small notebook. Weathered, pages folded, ink faded like it had been written in a hurry a long time ago. She handed it to me. No explanation, just a nod. I opened to the first page. No name, no date, just one sentence written in tiny script. I remember everything. That's the problem. I looked up, but she was already gone. That night I sat on my porch with the notebook in my lap and a cigarette I wasn't planning to light. I didn't read more, not yet, because I realized something. She hadn't given me that notebook for answers. She'd given it to me because, maybe for the first time in a long time, she wanted someone else to carry the silence with her. And that's when I understood. Kael didn't just know silence. She had survived it. And part of me wondered if I'd been trying to do the same. They say you can tell a soldier by their eyes, not by the way they walk or stand or talk, by the way they stare, like they're seeing a battlefield no one else can. And Kael, she had that stare. I'd seen it before. I wore it myself once. You don't forget that kind of look. You don't unsee it. It's the kind that says, I've been where people don't come back whole. But the strange thing was, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't flinching at sudden sounds, wasn't jumping at loud voices. She wasn't reacting like a human who had seen war. She was quiet, like something that had been built to carry it. One evening, after the library closed, I stayed behind. Told myself I was organizing shelves. Truth was, I just wanted to see what page she'd stopped at. It was the same book, same table, same page, an astronomy text, old and out of print. Page 172, a map of distant star systems, most unnamed, some barely confirmed. But one was circled, in pencil, light, faint. A system no one here had paid much attention to, except her. That night I went home and looked it up. Took me a while, but I found it buried in a database used by amateur astronomers. No known planets, no satellites, just a designation, System 621-ARC. I stared at the screen. Something in me knew. This wasn't just curiosity, this was memory. Hers, not mine. And maybe she wasn't circling it to find it again. Maybe she was mourning something she'd already lost. The next day, I asked her. Not directly, just enough. Ever heard of a system called 621-ARC? She froze, just for a breath. But it was enough. She closed the book slowly, folded her hands. That name doesn't mean anything, she said. But her voice, it was wrong. Not because of what she said, but how she said it. Too even, too smooth. Like someone repeating lines they'd rehearsed for so long they forgot how to speak without them. I didn't press. She stood, nodded, and left, just like always. But something inside me was already shifting. The kind of shift that doesn't come from facts or logic. It comes from knowing. Somewhere deep down, past all the scars and silence. I knew. Kael hadn't circled that star system because she missed it. She circled it because it was gone, and she was the only one left who remembered where it used to be. Some people break under questions. Others break under silence. Kael? She broke under music. It happened on a Sunday. The diner down the road had just fixed their old jukebox. Owner was proud as hell about it. Called it Restoring American History. I'd dropped in for pie, same as always. Kael was there too, sitting alone at the far end of the counter, turning her spoon in a mug of untouched tea. Then it came on, the song. Old vinyl crackle, slow piano, Billie Holiday's I'll Be Seeing You. At first, she didn't move, but I was watching her, like I always did when she wasn't looking. And I saw her fingers twitch, just slightly, like the notes had reached inside and pulled something she didn't know was still there. She looked up, blinked, once, then twice, And then, the first tear slid down her cheek. She didn't flinch, didn't wipe it away, just let it fall. I stood, crossed the room, and sat beside her. Didn't ask, didn't speak. Just sat there while Billy sang about places we remember, people we can't forget. Kael turned to me. Her voice wasn't shaking. It was too tired to shake. I don't know why this hurts. It's just a song, I said softly. She looked at me, almost angry. Number. It's more than that. It's like... She paused, struggling. It's like someone else's memory woke up in me. Maybe that's what music is, I said. A memory we didn't know we shared. She stared at the jukebox like it had just betrayed her deepest secret. Where I'm from, she said, we didn't have music. Didn't believe in it. Didn't need it. I waited. She swallowed. We thought memory was a burden. So we gave ours to machines, let them carry it, store it, edit it. We kept only what we needed to function. And the rest, erased, so we could survive. Her voice cracked. But I think something stayed, something they couldn't delete. Like what? She looked at me then, really looked. Longing. The jukebox went silent. She stood without another word and walked into the rain, didn't rush, didn't turn back. And I didn't follow, because I knew. She wasn't walking away from me. She was walking into a feeling no one had taught her how to carry. Something older than her programming. Older than her pain. Grief, not for a person, not for a place. For a world that had no music until now. It started with a hum. Not in the air, not in the town, but in the back of my head, like pressure, like something too still to be natural. I didn't say anything at first, thought it was just one of my headaches again. But when I looked up and saw Kael standing frozen in the middle of Main Street, staring into the sky, I knew. She heard it too. That night I found her in the library, lights off, alone. She had dismantled the security system, the fire alarm, and even the old landline, anything that could emit a signal. The table in front of her was covered in scattered pieces of metal and wiring, some hers, some not. "They've found this system," she said, without turning around. "Who?" She finally looked at me, and I saw it. Not fear, resignation. The ones who finished what the war started, they're called the Korthan. She said the name like it tasted bad. They erased my people, not with bombs, with silence. Erased our language, our stars, our memories, left nothing but code fragments drifting in dark space. I didn't move, couldn't. She held up a small chip, half the size of a coin. I've been running on backup memory for years, but when that song played, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The music had triggered something, an emotional ping, a broadcast, and someone, somewhere, had heard it. "So, what happens now?" I asked. She sighed. "They'll come to confirm. Just a scout ship, probably, but once they verify I'm alive, they'll come for you." "No," she said. "They'll come for this planet." I stared at her. At the woman I once thought just liked quiet places and disliked coffee. Now she was talking about planetary extinction like she was ordering groceries, but her hands were trembling. "You should leave," she said. "You've already stayed too long." "Not happening." "Michael, don't. You're not just a target. You're a person. You feel, you remember, you mourn. That makes you real." She closed her eyes. "They won't care." "Then let them come." Silence. Then softer. "I won't let them take you too. And I won't let you face them alone." The next morning, the first pulse came. A ripple through the sky. Barely visible to human eyes, but she saw it like a scream. Kael handed me a small data cube. "If I don't make it, get this off-world. there's still a chance the rest of my people's legacy can survive. What's on it? Everything I remember. She paused. Everything I feel. That was the moment I realized something. She hadn't come to Earth just to hide. She came here to hope, and now someone had to protect that hope, even if it meant going to war with a silence meant to erase stars. The moon bled that night, hung low and red above the ridgeline like it had something to mourn. We stood outside the town, where the dirt road broke into silence and the sky felt just a little too close. Kael didn't speak at first. She just stared at the moon, hands deep in her coat pockets like they might hold the answers she didn't know how to say. And then, finally, "Do you want to know what we were?" I turned to her, said nothing. Because the way she asked it, like she wasn't offering knowledge, she was offering confession. We thought memory was weakness, she said, so we stored it outside ourselves, in machines, in crystalline data. We didn't write stories, we wrote code. We didn't raise children, we cloned improvements. And we didn't feel love, we scheduled bonding sequences. She turned, met my eyes. We lasted longer than most species, we built cities that touched stars. But the longer we survived, the less we remembered why. Then the Korthon came. They didn't destroy us because we were dangerous. Her voice dropped. They destroyed us because we had nothing left they couldn't understand. She pulled something from her pocket, a fragment of transparent stone, pulsing faintly. This is all that's left, my memories, my thoughts, my mistakes. Why come here, I asked. Why Earth? Because Earth still sings. She smiled, faint, sad. You write poems on napkins. You cry during old movies. You name your storms. You feel, Michael. You bleed for things that don't help you survive. And somehow, that makes you stronger than we ever were. The wind picked up. Dust curled around our boots. Somewhere far off, thunder murmured like an old god waking up. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because the Korthon won't ask, they'll just erase. She looked up at the red moon again. I don't want to die as a file. I want to be remembered. As a person. Silence settled between us. Thick. Heavy. Sacred. Then I reached out, took the stone from her hand and closed my fingers around it. You will be. And for the first time since she fell to earth, Kael leaned into me. Not like someone bracing for war. Not like someone collapsing. But like someone learning what it meant to rest. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat beside her as she dreamed, if that's what it was, and watched the moon fade from red to pale. She'd told me everything. Not for answers, but because she needed someone who could carry her truth in something stronger than crystal. Memory. And I was going to carry it even if it broke me. Because some stories aren't meant to be stored, they're meant to be lived. It began with a sound that had no sound. The dogs in town started howling. The power flickered twice, and the wind dropped dead. I stepped outside and looked up. There it was, no thunder, no light show. Just a long, matte black vessel hovering behind the clouds, not hiding, just waiting. Like it knew there was no need to rush. Kael joined me on the porch, barefoot. She didn't look scared. She looked resolved. Like this had always been the end she expected. They've locked on, she said quietly. They don't know you. Yet? Good, I said. I'd like to keep it that way. She didn't smile, not this time. She placed a small transmitter on the railing. Something simple, barely humming. This will tell them I'm here. So don't turn it on. She looked at me. If I don't, they'll scan the planet. They'll detect memory artifacts, look deeper. People will die. So you're just going to give yourself up? No. She paused. I'm going to tell a story. She stepped forward and activated the beacon, a pulse, a tone, one long note rising into the sky. Seconds later, the clouds lit up, just once, silver and cold, not a weapon, a reply. They'd heard her. We drove into the hills to the old radio tower no one used anymore. That's where she said it had to happen, someplace high, someplace quiet. She wired the transmitter into the old console. Static filled the air, then her voice, clear, unfiltered, broadcasting straight into space. To the Korthun fleet currently in orbit, she said, I am Kael of the Cirith, last of my kind. You do not need to confirm. I confirm myself. You came to erase a remnant, to finish your work, but what you found is not code. She glanced at me. What you found is memory. She paused. I have cried. I have listened to music. I have mourned a world I no longer understand, and I have loved. If you erase me now, you will not be deleting an enemy. You will be destroying the first evidence that the Zirith learned what we feared most, emotion. Silence. She finished. We waited. 1 minute, then 2. Then the console blinked. Text only, cold, final. Transmission acknowledged, erasure not required. Legacy recorded. And then they left. Just like that, the sky cleared. No weapons, no invasion, just a single final pulse. Not of deletion, but of respect. Kael sank to her knees. I knelt beside her, held her shoulders as she wept. Not because she had to, because she could. The sky didn't cry that night, she did. And for the first time, the universe listened back. People still ask me why I live out here, middle of nowhere, no cell towers, no TV reception, just sky and silence. I tell them I like the quiet. But that's not the truth. I stay because this is where she was real. It's been years since the sky blinked that night. No ships, no signals, no signs of war. Just one woman on one little planet who told her story to the stars and was finally allowed to keep it. Gauls didn't stay much longer after that. Not because she was afraid, but because she said the quiet had done its work. She left me a notebook, same one she once handed me in the rain. But this time it was full. Every page, not of history, but of feelings. Songs she'd loved. Foods she tried. Things that scared her. Moments that surprised her. The way Billie Holiday's voice made her cry. The way my voice made her feel safe. At the very end, in faded ink, she wrote, If I am remembered, let it not be for surviving. Let it be for feeling. I built a shelf for that notebook. Put it next to the old radio. Sometimes, on nights when the wind dies and the moon hangs low, I open it. Read a page, then play the song she loved. And in the quiet that follows, I speak her name out loud. Kael. Just once, just soft, like it's still echoing in the stars. Because maybe it is. So if you're hearing this, wherever you are, if you've ever looked at someone and felt like they weren't from here, but they belonged anyway. If you've ever carried a grief you couldn't explain. If you've ever wanted someone not to remember what you were, but how you made them feel, then remember this. She wasn't human, not by birth, but she became one, in all the ways that mattered. Her name was Kael, and she was the last of her kind. But on Earth, she became the first of something new. If this story meant something to you, tell me why. Not for the algorithm, for her. Drop her name in the comments, so the stars don't forget.